Tonight we step quietly into a sun-warmed Berber carpet workshop, the kind tucked behind an alley where the shadows stay soft and the dust motes drift like they're auditioning for a perfume commercial. You stand in the doorway, squinting as the afternoon light spills in sideways, illuminating looms that look older than your last 5 questionable life choices combined. There's a moment where your senses flood, lanolin in the air, the scratchy sweet scent of wool, the hush of artisans who barely glance up because they've been doing this longer than you've been procrastinating bedtime. And yes, you probably won't survive this level of calm if you're listening while lying down, because your brain is already deciding to melt into the nearest soft surface. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take a tentative step inside, and the heat from the packed earth floor radiates through your shoes. The whole workshop hums, not loudly, not insistently, just a soft mechanical purr from the looms, as though they are breathing. Afternoon sunlight pours between roof slats, illuminating threads stretched in deliberate tension. You don't say a word, mostly because the vibe here is so serene you feel like one loud exhale might disrupt the time-space continuum. Also, one artisan glances at you with that calm, all-knowing don't knock over anything expression. A healthy reminder. Your eyes drift to the largest loom, towering, rectangular, and slightly crooked, the way a beloved bookshelf leans after several decades of loyal service. A woman seated before it moves her hands with steady precision. Every knot she ties is tiny but absolute, creating a rhythm so even you begin to breathe with it. Historians still argue whether this rhythm came from ancient work songs or from the steady pulse of nomadic life, but either way it settles your brain like a very fluffy weighted blanket. The sun seems to favor this workshop. Every beam glows golden, sliding across wool piles in saffron, rust, cream, and deep indigo. One artisan jokes that the sun is their unpaid employee. Your first light joke of the session, delivered with an eyebrow raise that says he's used it before. You chuckle softly because, well, you're a polite visitor and also slightly enchanted by the whole setting. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your thoughts. Berber weaving has been practiced in North Africa for thousands of years, with some designs dating back to the Neolithic period. And you're standing in a place where those designs still unfold like whispered family secrets. It's humbling, really. Not the depressing kind of humbling, more like being gently reminded that humans have been making cozy floor art since long before modern snacks, smartphones, or your ill-advised attempt to do your own plumbing. Someone gestures for you to walk farther in, so you do, weaving between baskets of wool. A tiny charm shaped like a hand, said to keep mischievous spirits from tangling the threads. Supposedly these spirits get bored easily and love a good prank, which, to be fair, sounds relatable. You're told the charm works about 70% of the time, which feels like the exact same success rate as your attempts at meal prepping. You move closer to the main workspace, careful not to step on anything because if you ruin a week's worth of weaving you will, in fact, dissolve into dust from the sheer embarrassment. The air is warm but not stifling, perfumed with wool, tea, and decades of stories. Light shifts again, sliding onto a half-finished carpet. You trace its edges without touching, because you're respectful and also because you're scared of messing up one perfect knot. The carpet's emerging pattern catches your eye, geometric yet soft. Symbols fold into one another. Diamonds, zigzags, small repeating motifs that look like tiny mountains. Someone tells you the diamond shapes represent protection, and the zigzags might mimic water or life's winding path. Historians still argue whether these interpretations were intended by the earliest weavers or whether modern scholars simply enjoy reading too much into triangles. You nod thoughtfully, as though you've always known triangles are controversial. A breeze sneaks through the slatted roof, stirring the wool in loose piles like they are sighing. The artisans barely react. They are used to the desert whims, but the threads shimmer under the shifting light. You feel oddly honored to witness something so simple yet quietly profound, an entire cultural memory, woven one silent knot at a time. Someone hands you a stool. It's small, wobbly, definitely hand-carved, and so short your knees rise to an awkward angle that would look downright comedic if anyone bothered to glance. Joke number 2 arrives internally as you try not to topple over with the grace of a startled goat. You settle eventually, resting nearby while the weavers continue their steady work. Your ears tune into the soft clack-clack of wooden tools, the whisper of wool sliding through fingers, the occasional giggle from 2 younger apprentices trying not to break concentration. One of them sits cross-legged, sorting wool with the seriousness of a surgeon, pausing every now and then to watch you with the kind of curiosity reserved for lost travelers and stray cats. The scent of mint wafts in from a corner kettle, reminding you of every tea you've ever pretended was just one more before bedtime. The artisans don't seem to rush anything. The entire room moves in its own unhurried timeline. You learn that some carpets take months to complete, longer if unexpected life events, local festivals, or goat-related shenanigans disrupt the workflow. Occasionally, a village goat will wander in and steal wool because even goats know quality when they see it. You look up again at the filtered light, realizing that everything in this room is both purposeful and peaceful. There are no machines humming, no digital clocks, no notifications. Just you, wool, sunlight, and the steady creation of something warm and lasting. You shift your weight slightly, careful not to squeak the stool, because you're starting to feel woven into the slow rhythms yourself. And as the afternoon deepens, you sense the moment beginning to stretch, inviting you further into the workshop's breath and warmth. The light shifts again, golden to amber, and the soft clack of the loom grows steady and hypnotic. You let your shoulders drop, your breath ease, and you prepare to follow the next quiet step in the journey. You stay on that wobbly little stool just long enough for your legs to file an official complaint, so when one of the artisans beckons you toward a low table piled high with wool, you rise with the enthusiasm of someone who's been given a socially acceptable reason to move. The wool mound looks like a small, soft mountain range, peaks of snowy white, dunes of sandy beige, and pockets of deeper, earthier browns. You reach out to touch one and instantly understand why these carpets feel so comforting, even unprocessed. The fibers are springy, warm, and oddly reassuring, like petting a sheep that has absolutely no personal space issues. The artisan closest to you, an older woman with eyes that could probably identify wool quality from across the village, motions for you to sit beside her. She works silently at first, her fingers moving with the calm certainty of someone sorting memories rather than fibers. She picks up a handful of wool, examines it with a small squint, then pulls it apart with quick, deft motions. It's only after a minute that she begins to speak, her voice low and musical, as if the room itself insists on keeping things gentle. She explains that wool is sorted by touch as much as by color. Fineness, crimp, softness. The kinds of things your untrained fingers pretend to understand even though, let's be honest, you're currently nodding like someone at a wine tasting who's never had wine. But you try anyway, lifting a handful and giving it a tentative squeeze. It's warm and cushy and slightly oily from the natural lanolin. You tell her it feels nice. She gives you the polite smile reserved for tourists who have oversimplified a 3,000-year-old process. Fair. A mainstream historical fact slips into your awareness. Amazigh communities have relied on sheep, and therefore wool, since ancient times, using the fibers for clothing, tents, and of course carpets. For nomadic groups, wool was not just a material but a survival tool, insulating their homes and clothing against cold desert nights. You imagine those early weavers sitting under similar beams of light, sorting wool by touch alone, their hands as weathered and skillful as the ones working beside you now. You watch more closely. The artisans separate the wool into piles based on fineness, then subcategories of softness, then even more granular categories that your brain was not prepared to process today. Historians still argue whether these sorting methods evolved independently in each region or whether they came from trade routes connecting North Africa with distant civilizations. The artisans around you? They argue about which cousin has been secretly mixing lower quality batches just to finish her chores early. You decide to stay out of that one. You lean in again, fascinated by how little talking is needed. Everyone's hands move in concert. Grasp, pull, fluff, release, repeat. Occasionally, someone flicks away a tiny burr or seed pod with the dramatic flair of a magician revealing a dove. It's mesmerizing, almost meditative, and before long you feel your shoulders loosening again. Your mind wanders into that soft zone where thoughts drift like the wool fibers in front of you. This workshop really is a conspiracy to make you sleepy. The woman beside you nudges your hand gently, guiding your fingers across a freshly sorted pile. "Feel this one," she says. You do. It's finer, silkier, almost cloud-like. You blink, impressed, then joke that this must be the VIP wool, very important puff. She laughs, the kind of warm, approving laugh artisans give when a visitor is at least trying to keep up. She explains that this wool often comes from the softer undercoat of certain sheep, prized for its texture. According to local law, shepherds used to tell which sheep had the best wool by noticing which ones loved being petted. The friendliest sheep produced the softest fibers. Of course, she admits with a shrug, historians would probably disagree, though her tone suggests historians should pet more sheep before forming opinions. As you work, you begin to recognize subtle differences. Some wool springs back immediately when you squeeze it. Some holds the shape of your fingers for a beat before relaxing. Some feels almost powdery, like it's already halfway to becoming thread. You marvel at how much knowledge hides in touch alone. We live in an age where people panic if their phone battery dips below 20%. Yet here are artisans who can tell the difference between two nearly identical tufts using only the whisper of their fingertips. A young apprentice sits across from you, quietly sorting her pile. Occasionally she sneaks glances at you, trying not to stare but failing adorably. Finally, she asks if you'd like to try sorting a batch on your own. This is clearly a trap. Or a test. Or possibly both. But you accept anyway, because you're brave and also mildly competitive. She hands you a mound and points to 3 piles: soft, softer, and softest. You nod with the confidence of someone who absolutely cannot tell the difference but believes in the power of enthusiasm. You pick up a tuft, squeeze it gently, make a thoughtful expression to hide your confusion, and place it in the softest pile. She watches. Then she picks it back up, moves it to soft, and gives you the kind of smile teachers use when they say, "Good effort." You try again. And again. And on your 3rd attempt, you actually get one right. She claps quietly. You bask in your triumph. While you're enjoying your small victory, another artisan slides over a basket filled with wool that's been washed and sun-dried. The scent of clean fiber mixed with mountain air is unexpectedly delightful, like a wool-scented candle you didn't know you needed. He tells you that in some villages, washing wool in flowing streams was once considered essential, as the movement of water was believed to chase away bad luck. Not scientifically proven, but charming. And honestly, if modern superstitions included wash your laundry in a river so life goes better, you might actually consider it. As you continue helping, someone brings around a tray of small snacks, almonds, dried figs, and a couple of pastries dusted with sugar. You accept one, because declining homemade snacks is internationally recognized as poor life choices. Another joke floats into your mind about how you're basically being paid in snacks to sort wool. and honestly, it might be your dream job. The afternoon light shifts again, stretching shadows toward the far wall. The wall piles glow softly, turning the whole workshop into a patchwork of warm tones and textures. The artisans begin gathering the sorted fibers into baskets, readying them for the next stage. You realize how much care goes into even this early step of the process. Quiet, patient care that most people never see. You brush stray wool from your hands, surprised by how natural the motion feels now. Your fingers smell faintly of lanolin, earth, and sunshine. When an artisan nods toward another corner of the workshop, you instinctively follow, sensing the day's rhythm carrying you to the next gentle task. The looms continue their steady music behind you, and you feel yourself slipping deeper into the heart of the workshop's calm, ready for the next warm piece of the journey to unfold. You follow the nod toward a sunlit corner where a cluster of clay pots sits like shy turtles basking in the afternoon glow. At first glance, the pots look ordinary, earthy, scuffed, stained from years of use. But as you get closer, you notice something enchanting. The rims of each vessel are tinted with color. Rusty reds, deep blues, muted greens, and soft golds cling to the edges like ghosts of past dye batches. The scents shift as you approach, herbal, mineral, slightly smoky, and a little bit mysterious, as if someone simmered secrets for lunch. A dye maker stands beside them, busy stirring a pot with a long wooden stick that looks like it could double as a wizard's staff. He glances up when he hears your steps, his smile slow and warm. Without a word, he hands you a tiny spoon-like scoop and gestures toward the pots. You may not speak the same language fluently, but "Come smell this weird and wonderful thing" is universal. The first pot you lean over releases a scent like dried leaves soaked in sunlight. The color inside glows warm and earthy. Madder root, he explains, tapping the rim lightly. A mainstream historical fact springs to mind. Madder has been used as a dye across ancient civilizations, from Egypt to Rome, producing shades of red that once colored the uniforms of soldiers and the garments of royalty. Here, though, it feels softer, more personal, as though it's about to transform wool into something warm enough to wrap around a whole story. The next pot holds a dark, moody brew, somewhere between blue ink and stormy sky. You inhale cautiously, hoping it won't punch you in the sinuses. Surprisingly, it smells faintly earthy, like rain hitting dry soil. Indigo, he says, tapping this pot, too. Indigo has a reputation, once so valuable across trade routes that it was nicknamed blue gold. You've seen the color in jeans, sure, but there's something electric about seeing its raw form simmering in a clay pot under afternoon sunlight, waiting to stain the world. The dye maker invites you closer, motioning like he's about to share insider gossip. He picks up a bundle of dried leaves, crinkled and greenish-brown, and crushes one gently between his fingers. The leaf crumbles like old paper. He says these leaves come from the foothills of the distant Atlas Mountains, carried back in woven bags by traders and shepherds. According to local law, indigo plants used to grow best where mischievous spirits danced at night, flattening the ground and leaving behind soil that hummed with color. He shrugs after telling you this, as though admitting the spirits may or may not exist, but the plants definitely do. You crouch beside him as he stares. The motion is slow, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. The steam curls upward, drifting toward the beams of sunlight like it's trying to escape into a prettier Instagram filter. He gestures for you to dip your scoop into the pot. You do, lifting it carefully. The liquid clings thickly before slipping back in, swirling in elegant patterns that look like they belong on expensive pottery. Historians still argue whether indigo reached North Africa through Phoenician traders or via sub-Saharan routes, he says, speaking slowly so you catch every word. His voice has the tone of someone who enjoys the debate but isn't especially worried about how the academics sort it out. But either way, he adds with a wink, The color knows where it belongs. You follow him to the next pot, which emits a scent somewhere between hay and citrus, with a hint of something sweet. A golden yellow dye simmers inside. He lifts a small cloth bundle from the liquid, squeezing it gently. Saffron, he says, though not the kind used for cooking. This variety grows wild in certain mountain pockets, producing richer pigment than flavor. Your brain whispers a financial joke, because saffron is famously pricey, and you imagine a carpet worth roughly the GDP of a small village if dyed entirely in this color. You don't say this out loud, but the thought makes you smile. He notices and grins, as though he read your mind. Too expensive, he confirms, waving his hand. We mix it with other plants. Another artisan overhears and calls out a joke in Amazigh that makes everyone laugh. You catch only the tone, but based on the chuckles, you're pretty sure it translates to something like, only the goats can afford pure saffron carpets. The final pot surprises you. It contains a murky greenish concoction that smells faintly metallic, like damp stones after rain. He tells you it's created from copper-rich minerals found in the nearby hills. The resulting dye produces a soft green that appears in many traditional carpets as a grounding color. You look closer and see flecks of mineral sparkling faintly in the sunlight. It feels like holding a little piece of mountain inside a pot. He hands you a bundle of unspun wool, soft, fluffy, and a little curly, and motions toward the saffron dye. You blink. Is he really letting you dye wool? You glance around to make sure no one else objects. No one does. In fact, a couple of apprentices watch with amusement, ready for your rookie moment. He lowers the wool into the pot while you hold the other end like a child holding a kite string. The wool sinks, absorbs, transforms. You watch, wide-eyed, as the pale fibers drink in the yellow, becoming something glowing and warm. He tells you to lift it slowly. You do, and for a brief second you feel like you're performing ancient magic, color appearing where none existed a moment before. The wool drips. You hold it out carefully. The apprentices clap lightly, encouragingly. You beam with pride because apparently you are capable of dye-based sorcery. The dye maker hangs the wool on a long wooden rod to dry. The entire rod holds dozens of colors, some bold, some soft, some earthy, some bright. It's like someone hung a rainbow and forgot to take it down after a festival. While the dyed wool dries, he shows you a few stones and plants used in rare batches. One stone is bright orange, another deep purple. You learn another odd tidbit. A certain parasitic insect once produced prized crimson dye in some regions. Historically true, slightly unsettling, and suddenly you're very aware of how much of human history is built on we crushed something weird to make it colorful. You take a moment to breathe it all in, the scents, the steam, the warmth. The afternoon sun shifts again, sliding across the drying rod so the colors glow like stained glass. You feel suspended in time, part of a ritual older than any of your worries, older than your to-do list, older even than the idea of rushing through life. Another breeze trickles in, swirling steam and dust and scent around you. The dye maker gives you a nod, one artisan to another, even if your contribution so far amounts to one slightly uneven hank of golden wool. Still, you feel included, woven into the craft. And as he returns to his pots, stirring with that steady, ancient rhythm, you follow the next gesture calling you deeper into the workshop's unfolding story. You drift from the dye corner as naturally as a leaf riding a lazy breeze, following the soft rustle of movement toward a wide, shallow basket overflowing with fluffy wool. The fibers look even lighter now, newly dyed strands mixed with natural ones, little clouds with personality disorders. A few artisans sit around the basket, carding tools in hand, their motions steady and unhurried. You approach, and one of them pats the ground beside her, inviting you into the circle. You fold yourself down gracefully, or what you hope looks graceful, and settle in. Carding tools are placed in front of you. 2 wooden paddles studded with rows of tiny metal teeth. They look a bit like medieval hairbrushes, and you have a fleeting moment of concern about accidentally brushing your own head. Don't worry, you don't. At least, not yet. The woman beside you lifts a handful of wool and spreads it across one paddle. Then she brings the second paddle down in a smooth, practiced sweep. The motion is gentle but firm, like petting a cat that pretends it hates affection. The fibers stretch, align, puff, and gradually transform from tangled fluff into an airy sheet of uniform softness. The sound it makes, soft as it is oddly soothing, like distant waves brushing sand. You attempt to mimic her, placing a tuft of wool onto your paddle with intense concentration, the same face you probably make when trying to fold fitted sheets. She nods approvingly, so you begin the first stroke. It feels natural for exactly half a second, then your paddles stick together in a way that strongly suggests user error. The artisans chuckle warmly. No one mocks you. They've all been here, the beginner stage, where wool seems to sense your fear and behaves accordingly. You try again, more slowly this time. SHHK. Better. SHHK. Even better. The fibers begin to loosen and arrange themselves, stretching into delicate, silky layers. You feel a strange pride bloom in your chest, small, like the first sprout from a seed, but unmistakable. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind as you work. Traditional carding tools have been used for centuries across the world, but in many Amazigh villages, hand carding remained the primary method long after industrial tools became available, simply because the hand-prepared wool yields a texture machines can't replicate. The artisans here seem to share that sentiment, moving with the calm patience of people confident in methods that have outlasted empires. The woman next to you leans over to inspect your progress, nodding thoughtfully before flicking away a tiny burr lodged in the fibers. Then she tells you, in some older villages, it was believed that if you carded wool too quickly, mischievous jinn might slip into the fibers and make the carpet misbehave. Misbehave how? She shrugs and says, crooked corners, stubborn threads, maybe a cursed squeak when you step on it. You make a mental note to card slowly, just in case. As you fall into a rhythm with the paddles, the room softens around you. The dyed wool drying on the rods nearby glows like pastel lanterns. The looms clack in the background with steady precision. And the afternoon seems to lengthen, stretching its golden fingers into every quiet corner. Carding is deceptively physical. Your arms work, your wrists move, your shoulders adjust, but the overall effect is oddly calming. Your body focuses on the motion while your mind drifts like smoke. Thoughts slip away one by one, replaced by the tactile softness under your hands. For a few moments, you're not multitasking. You're not recalling your overdue emails. You're just aligning tiny fibers so they can become something beautiful. An older man sits across from you, carding with the kind of finesse that makes you wonder if he could card while blindfolded while reciting poetry. He pauses only to sip mint tea, then continues smoothing wool like he's coaxing it into telling its secrets. He glances at your work and offers a quiet suggestion. Loosen your grip, let the wool guide you. You try it. He's right. The wool behaves differently, more cooperative, more willing to align. You make your third light joke of the segment, something about needing to apply this let it guide you philosophy to your inbox, and the artisans laugh, even if they caught only the tone. Laughter translates perfectly. You notice how the carding process gradually transforms the pile of wool. Messy tufts become uniform rolls, gathered neatly in a basket that grows fuller by the minute. These soft rolls, you learn, are essential for spinning. If the fibers aren't well aligned now, the thread later will be uneven or brittle. Like life, Someone murmurs with a smile. You prepare the beginnings carefully. Historians still argue whether early Amazigh carding techniques were influenced by neighboring Mediterranean cultures or developed independently among mountain and desert communities. The artisans in front of you shrug when you mention this. Their answer is simple: we learned from those before us. Sometimes history doesn't need to be an argument, it just needs a pair of hands passing knowledge to another pair. You keep carding, gaining confidence. The air fills with tiny motes of wool drifting lazily upward before settling again, giving the room a dreamy haze. Sunlight catches them, turning each floating fiber into a glimmering speck. It feels like a snow globe moment, except warm and scented faintly of lanolin. A breeze sneaks through a gap in the roof, stirring the fibers so that for a heartbeat, everything dances: wool, dust, light. No one comments. They've seen this thousands of times. But for you, it feels quietly magical. Your arms begin to tire. Not painfully, more like the gentle fatigue you get from kneading dough or carrying grocery bags you swore were light enough to manage in one trip. The artisans notice and gesture for you to pause. One hands you a small cup of mint tea, fragrant and sweet. You sip slowly, savoring the warmth sliding down your throat. While you drink, the older man tells you about a tradition. In some communities, the first wool carded for a carpet is blessed with a short phrase asking for peace in the home it will rest in. He demonstrates by touching the wool gently and murmuring something soft. You don't know the words, but you recognize the tone: tender, hopeful, worn smooth by generations of repetition. You return to carding after your tea break, feeling both physically lighter and emotionally fuller. The wool beneath your hands now feels familiar, almost friendly. The paddles glide with less resistance. You're no master, but you're no longer a danger to innocent fibers. As the basket fills, one of the younger artisans gathers the finished rolls and carries them across the room to the spinner's corner. You watch her go, curious, feeling that the next step of the process is calling to you like a soft thread tugging at your sleeve. The carding circle shifts, packing up their tools in quiet satisfaction. The sun leans lower, warming the workshop in deep amber. You stand, brushing stray wool from your clothes, and follow the path of the newly carded bundles, ready to watch raw softness spin into story. You trail after the bundles of carded wool as they are carried toward a low, shaded corner of the workshop where the air feels noticeably cooler. Here, the world seems to soften even more. A spinning wheel rests by the wall, simple, wooden, worn smooth by decades of hands, and beside it sits a woman whose posture radiates the calm authority of someone who could probably spin thread during an earthquake without dropping rhythm. She gestures for you to sit, her eyes warm, amused, and just a little mischievous. The wheel begins to turn with a gentle whir, a sound so soft and steady it feels like the workshop's heartbeat. You realize instantly why people describe spinning wheels as soothing. Something about the circular motion quiets the mind. Almost hypnotic. If this were a bedtime video, and it is, you suspect at least 3 people have already started drifting off right now. You resist the temptation, mostly because you'd like to avoid snoring in front of a master spinner. She picks up a roll of carded wool, pulls a small tuft from the end, and starts feeding it into the wheel. The transformation is instant and astonishing. Loose fiber becomes a thin, even strand, winding itself around the spindle with elegant inevitability. It looks effortless, as though the thread just happens, like water deciding to become a river. But you suspect this is the kind of effortlessly that takes a lifetime to master. She hands you a bundle and lifts an eyebrow. Oh no. Oh yes. It's your turn. You take the tuft as if accepting a sacred scroll. She slows the wheel, guiding your fingers with light taps. Pinch here, pull gently there. You try to mimic her movements, but your first attempt produces something that looks like a thread having an identity crisis. Thick, Thin, thick, absolutely chaotic. She chuckles softly, not unkindly. You joke that your thread is expressing itself creatively, which earns a laugh from two apprentices nearby. She tries again, showing you how to maintain tension. Your next attempt is marginally better. Marginally. The spinner studies your lumpy creation with the polite neutrality of a teacher grading an essay that clearly began with good intentions. "It will do," she says gently. A lie? Perhaps. But a beautiful one. A mainstream historical fact settles into your thoughts as you work. Spinning has been central to Amazigh life for millennia. In many communities, spinners were respected not just for their skill but for their ability to create material essential to clothing, shelter, and trade. Ancient spindle whorls, those small weighted discs used before wheels, have been found across North Africa, some decorated, others plain, all proof that turning fiber into thread has always been an art. The spinner shares a story while your fingers try not to panic. She tells you that in her grandmother's day, young girls learned spinning before they learned letters, because thread, she says, was the first line of any story. You love that. It feels poetic, true, and just sentimental enough to stick with you for years. Some families used to believe that threads spun at night were luckier, stronger, and less likely to tangle because spirits wandering in the dark helped guide the fibers. She says this with a straight face, then adds, "But only if you stayed quiet. Spirits dislike chatter." She winks. You decide not to ask follow-up questions. The wheel spins steadily, and you begin to find a faint trace of rhythm. Not mastery, not even competence, but rhythm. The fibers stretch, twist, and unite into thread. You realize that spinning isn't just about twisting wool, it's about trust. Trusting that pressure, pull, and patience will somehow converge into something usable. Historians still argue whether the spinning will reach North Africa through Islamic Spain, Sicily, or trade across the Sahara, she says casually, as though academics are bickering right beside the baskets. But it doesn't matter. The hands learned the motion. You like this perspective. It feels grounded. Like the workshop itself. Practical, focused, uninterested in debates that cannot dye wool or turn it into thread. You watch her spin again, this time at regular speed. Her hands move with mesmerizing fluidity. The wheel hums. Sunlight flickers across the rotating spokes. Something about the motion calms parts of your brain you didn't know were tense. Even your breathing syncs with it. Inhale during the pull, exhale during the twist. An apprentice hands her a new bundle of dyed wool, your saffron-tinted creation from earlier. She holds it up for you to admire. Under the afternoon light, it glows a warm golden shade that reminds you of honey drizzled over bread. She begins spinning it into thread, and suddenly your uneven beginner threads seem even more avant-garde. You swallow your pride. The wheel turns. The wool slips through her fingers in a soft whisper. Golden thread forms. Each rotation feels like a small miracle, or at least like something that would impress even the pickiest of textile historians. You ask her, through gestures and a few shared words, whether spinning ever gets boring. She laughs, shaking her head. Every thread is different, she says. Some behave. Some argue. She narrows her eyes playfully. You made one that argues. You grin. Guilty. She lets you try again, slower this time. With her hand guiding yours, you manage a short stretch of thread that isn't entirely terrible. One of the apprentices cranes her neck to see. She gives you a tiny thumbs up. You glow with pride, just a little. The spinner shows you how the finished thread is wound onto a spindle, then stored on a wooden rack where dozens of colorful strands hang like a curtain made of rainbows. Blues, reds, greens, oranges, each shade a testament to dye pots and careful hands. You imagine how these threads will soon join warp and weft, anchoring stories into knots. As you help her wind a spindle, she tells you another small secret. Some spinners believe that singing softly while spinning helps the thread stay smooth. She doesn't demonstrate, but her voice carries a melody anyway, woven into her words. It's a superstition, she admits, but a wholesome one. Hardly anyone argues with a superstition that makes work more pleasant. The light continues shifting, warming the corner of the workshop in deep amber. Threads glow like they are absorbing the sun itself. And you realize how deeply human this all is, turning chaos into order, softness into strength, color into meaning. You feel someone lightly tap your shoulder, a gesture that suggests the next stage of the craft awaits. You place your imperfect spindle on the rack with the others, your thread proudly lopsided, and rise from the spinner's quiet sanctuary. The wheel hums behind you, offering one last calming whisper as you move toward the looming warp thread stretched across the room, ready for the next delicate chapter. The warp threads greet you before you even reach them, rows of vertical lines stretched tight across a wooden loom, humming with quiet tension like a harp waiting for music. You slow your steps instinctively, sensing the shift in the workshop's energy. If the dye pot simmered with mystery and the spinning corner pulsed with slow, hypnotic rhythm, the warp feels deliberate, mathematical. A place where even the air seems to respect straight lines. A master weaver stands waiting, her posture tall, her hands steady, her expression the serene version of someone who knows you're about to make at least 3 mistakes but will let you try anyway. She gestures with a nod for you to come closer, closer than you expected, and suddenly you find yourself awkwardly navigating around the frame, trying not to touch anything you're not supposed to. The loom towers over you, bigger up close than it ever looked from the other side of the workshop, its vertical threads pulled taut with a precision that feels both fragile and unbreakable. She taps one of the warp threads lightly. It vibrates with a tiny, high-pitched tune, and she nods as if confirming something only she can hear. Like pathways, she murmurs. You lean in. The threads shimmer faintly under the shifting sunlight, and you see it. The idea of roads mapped in fiber, each line a potential journey, waiting for color and not to give it shape. She invites you to touch one. You hesitate. What if your clumsy fingers throw off the tension? What if you accidentally unravel the entire loom and are banished from the workshop forever, your name whispered only as a cautionary tale? But she insists with a gentle smile, so you place 2 fingers on a single warp thread. It feels surprisingly firm, like the string of a musical instrument, and surprisingly warm, having absorbed the afternoon heat. A mainstream historical fact slides into your mind. Among Amazigh weavers, the warp is traditionally set up by women who understand not only the technical work but the symbolic value of the layout. Some patterns are planned, others emerge intuitively as the weaving progresses. In certain regions, warp arrangement is considered the spine of the carpet. If it's wrong, nothing else can be saved. No pressure. She hands you a bundle of the thread you helped spin earlier, thankfully not your most chaotic one, but a smoother, golden strand. Watch first, she says. Her fingers move with elegant certainty, looping the thread around a hook, pulling it through the loom's vertical forest, securing it with practiced flicks. You try to follow each step, but her hands are so efficient you lose track halfway through. She finishes in a heartbeat and steps aside, letting you absorb the structure up close. The warp threads crisscross near the bottom, forming a subtle gateway. She hands you the tool used to maintain spacing, a slim wooden comb-like piece, and encourages you to try. You position yourself carefully, holding the comb as if performing surgery. You slide it between the threads, all focus, all determination. The threads shift obediently. You exhale. Look at you, pretending to know what you're doing. She nods approvingly. Then she takes the comb back and uses it with even greater precision, tapping it upward, shaping the negative space between threads. The warp must breathe, she explains. Not too tight. Not too loose. You nod, secretly relieved that this rule applies to looms and not to your life choices, which have historically leaned too far toward chaotic looseness. She signals for you to assist with the next part, adding supplementary warp threads, shorter segments that will help define the pattern's geometry. You help hold the threads while she feeds them into their places. You notice the gentle friction of fiber against your skin and the way the tension subtly shifts as each new thread joins the structure. It's like helping build a tiny bridge, one quiet line at a time. Historians still argue whether early Berber looms took inspiration from ancient Egyptian horizontal looms or whether they descended from even earlier Saharan weaving traditions. Your teacher, however, does not seem invested in this debate. She points instead to a faint mark carved into the loom's frame, small, geometric, almost hidden. My grandmother added that, she says. For luck. She taps it once with affection. You lean closer. The carving resembles a diamond, a shape you've already learned will appear again and again in the carpet's eventual design. The symbol feels like a thread itself, connecting past and present. You wonder how many hands have touched that exact spot over the years. She guides your attention back to the warp. Your turn, she says, handing you another thread. You freeze. Surely she means someone else? But she continues watching you with the calm confidence of someone determined to let you learn, even if slowly. You mimic her earlier steps. Loop. Pull. Secure. The thread slips once, twice, 3 times, each failure earning a soft chuckle from someone behind you, maybe one of the apprentices. Joke number 1 unfolds naturally. You mutter that the thread is clearly rebelling against management, and the chuckle becomes a giggle. That's fair. The thread is rebellious. Finally, with her guidance, you secure it properly. She pats your shoulder lightly, a gesture of easy approval. You beam like a student who has just successfully spelled a word after 3 tries. As you help with the warp, the workshop around you seems to hush. Even the looms at the far end soften their clacking, as if respecting the seriousness of this stage. The warp is the skeleton, the foundation, everything else depends on it. You sense this truth in the way the weaver adjusts each line with reverence, almost tenderness. She pauses to sip her mint tea, then tells you that some families used to set up warp threads while reciting short blessings or riddles for good luck. If the weaver solved the riddle before the warp was finished, it was considered a sign the carpet would be sold quickly. You imagine an entire room of skilled women speed weaving while trying to solve a brain teaser, and the image makes you smile. You notice, too, how the light shifts once more. The sun dips lower, painting the warp threads in warm golds and ambers. Each line glows like a sunbeam captured in fiber. You momentarily forget you're supposed to be assisting and just watch the shimmering threads, slightly mesmerized. The weaver nudges your elbow gently back to the task. Right. Focus. Comb, tension, spacing. You resume helping, and each motion feels more natural. The warp begins to resemble a doorway, an entrance into something yet to be woven. When the last thread is secured, she steps back, tilting her head with an artist's satisfaction. You feel a surprising swell of pride. You contributed, however humbly. She doesn't say well done, but she doesn't need to. Her small nod speaks volumes. The loom stands ready now, a quiet monument of lines and possibility. And with the warp set, you sense the next step waiting like a breath, the moment when knots begin to build worlds. The master weaver gestures for you to follow her to the cushion set before the loom. A place at the front. A place for the knots that turn pathways into patterns. The air shifts again. The journey deepens. and you step forward. You settle onto the low cushion with a kind of reverence, knees folding beneath you as the loom towers above, its newly arranged warp threads glowing faintly in the late afternoon light. The master weaver settles beside you, close enough that you can hear the faintest creak of her bracelets when she moves. She hands you a small knife with a curved, almost beak-like blade. It looks delicate, but you suspect it could slice through a thread, and possibly your dignity, without hesitation. "This," she says softly, "is for the knots." Right. Knots. The very heart of this whole operation. The tiny actions that transform straight lines into stories. You feel the atmosphere shift again, as if the loom, the walls, and even the dust motes have paused to watch you. She reaches beside her and picks up a thin bundle of wool, deep crimson, richer than any fruit you've ever seen, dark as pomegranate seeds in the shade. The color instantly snares your attention. You helped dye some of this earlier, but through the careful hands of the spinner and the magic of sunlight, it looks even more alive now. She splits off a small piece, twists it lightly between her fingers, and positions it against the warp threads. "Look closely," she murmurs. Her hands move with unhurried precision. She loops the wool around 2 warp threads, pulls gently, twists, tucks, secures. A single knot appears, discreet yet purposeful. It looks tiny, innocent. But you already know better. This is how entire cosmologies get built. One little knot at a time. She makes a second, then a third, each placed with its own rhythm. She nods toward the loom. "Now you." You exhale slowly, the ASMR narrator voice in your head whispering, "You'll be fine, probably." You reach for the wool with deliberate care, determined not to embarrass the warp you helped set. The fibers feel soft but slightly springy between your fingertips, like a tiny animal breathing. You try to mimic her motions, loop, pull, twist, tuck. Except your loop is a little too loose. Your pull is a little too enthusiastic. Your twist looks more like a confused tangle. The wool droops sadly, less a knot and more a tiny red shrug. She gently takes your hands, adjusting the angle of your fingers. Her palms are calloused, warm, steady. "Not so tight," she says. "The thread should feel welcomed, not trapped." You try again. Loop, pull, twist, tuck. This time the knot holds. Wobbly, yes, but unquestionably a knot. You grin like you've just performed minor surgery successfully. A mainstream historical fact rolls through your mind. The knot density, often measured in knots per square inch or square centimeter, has traditionally been higher in urban or court workshop carpets, while rural Berber rugs favored larger, looser knots that give them their distinctive texture and durability. Your knot, frankly, looks like it belongs in neither category yet, but that's fine. You're learning. The master weaver gestures for you to continue. You form another knot. Better. Then another. Slowly, a small row of crimson dots takes shape. They don't look like much yet, but you feel the immense satisfaction of doing something that will stay in the world long after you've had your tea and your nap and your occasional existential crisis. She begins guiding you into the rhythm of knotting. Place. Loop. Pull. Tighten. Snip. The tiny knife trims the ends so cleanly that you barely see the fibers fall. She taps the rowel lightly with her comb, pushing the knots into alignment. They form a small band of color, your first actual contribution to a physical artwork older than most empires. No big deal or anything. The weaver points upward at the bare warp stretching above. Symbols come later, she explains. First, a foundation. Then the meaning. She pauses, then adds that in some regions, weavers used to embed tiny charms or even stray beads in early rows of knots for protection. Not for the carpet, for themselves. Working long hours at the loom could leave a person feeling vulnerable, so these hidden additions acted as little companions. You glance at your knots and briefly wonder whether slipping in a tiny chocolate wrapper would count, though that would probably get you gently but firmly escorted out. You keep working, your hands slowly finding a comfortable rhythm. A joke slips out before you can stop it. Wow, this is basically ancient pixel art. The weaver chuckles softly, nodding as if she completely understands, even if she's never seen an 8-bit character in her life. With each new knot, time seems to thicken around you. The outside world disappears. The loom becomes your entire horizon, stretching up like an unfinished sunrise. The wool glides between your fingers, warm from the afternoon air. You inhale faint hints of lanolin and mint tea and old cedarwood, the combined scent of 100 years of artisanship clinging to the workshop. As you knot, the master weaver begins explaining the motifs that will appear in later rows. The diamond, often symbolizing protection. The X shapes, representing human figures or connection. The stepped shapes that might echo mountains or the path of ancestors. She tells you that historians still argue whether certain Berber symbols originated as spiritual talismans or simply as aesthetic patterns that later gained meaning. You look at the crimson row before you and feel the tug of that mystery. How much of a symbol is intention, and how much is recognition? You continue knotting. Another row forms. The wool shifts color now, deep indigo this time, cool as the late evening sky. The transition between colors begins to hint at a pattern. Not a clear one yet, but the seed of one. The weaver taps your shoulder and hands you a small bundle of bright orange wool. You blink at it. It looks like it escaped from the world's friendliest sunset. She grins. For contrast, she says. You add a few knots, and the tiny bursts of orange make the darker rows above and below suddenly more vivid. It's astonishing how much difference such tiny actions make. As you work, another joke slips out, something about how, if your knots keep improving at this rate, you'll be accepting carpet commissions by next Tuesday. The apprentices giggle, and the master weaver shakes her head fondly. Slowly, she says. Everything important takes time. Another hour seems to pass. Or maybe it's 10 minutes. Hard to tell. The workshop's hum settles into your bones. The rustle of wool, the soft breaths of artisans, the shuffle of feet as someone places a tray of fresh tea nearby. Everything merges into one gentle, hypnotic texture. By the time the weaver finally stops you, the loom bears a small but definite patch of patterned rows, your handiwork woven into its earliest stages. You sit back and stretch your fingers, which feel pleasantly tired. You examine your work with a kind of sleepy pride. It's not perfect, but it's real. And it's yours. The master weaver gathers the leftover wool and places it gently into a woven bowl, then nods to the cushion beside her. Rest, she says. The knots will wait. And so you do, heart steady, hands warm, surrounded by the quiet, ancient conversation of fiber and intention. The moment you shift away from the loom, your legs crackle with that half-asleep fuzziness that comes from sitting cross-legged for far too long. You stand, sway just a little, gracefully, of course, and then try to pretend that wobble was totally intentional. The master weaver catches your eye, amusement flickering there. She gestures toward the low table where a metal tray gleams with glasses of mint tea. Steam curls upward in soft ribbons. Instantly, the room feels warmer, softer, like the air itself is exhaling. You follow her across the workshop. The clack of looms continues around you, but you notice something different now. The rhythm has settled into a companionable backdrop, a heartbeat rather than a noise. It's as if, after your knotting attempts, the looms have decided you're part of the team. Or at least that you're not a danger to the structural integrity of the building. At the table, several artisans already sit cross-legged on cushions, arranged in a loose semicircle. They scoot a little to make room for you. Someone presses a warm glass into your hands, the traditional tulip-shaped kind that always seems exactly the right size for a moment like this. The mint is so fresh it smells green, if that makes sense, and the sugar sings on your tongue with the first sip. You exhale. The warmth moves through your body like a soft tide. This is the tea break you didn't realize how much you needed. As the group settles, the master weaver sets a half-finished carpet across her lap. It's small, maybe a sampler or a teaching piece, with rows of motifs already visible. Diamonds, stepped lines, little chevron shapes that look like birds frozen mid-flight. She gestures for you to come closer. You lean in. "These are our stories," she says, fingertips brushing the symbols. Some old, some new. You trace one of the diamonds lightly with a finger, careful not to snag any fibers. "I've seen this one before," you say. She nods. "Everyone has. It travels." A mainstream historical fact drifts up. Some Amazigh carpet motifs traveled widely because they were carried along caravan routes, from the high Atlas to desert oases, to Mediterranean markets, and eventually into European homes. It's a migration of symbols made through wool instead of ink. Sometimes, a pattern woven by a woman in a tiny mountain village would eventually sit beneath a French merchant's feet, miles and centuries removed from its meaning. Beside you, one of the younger weavers, no more than 15, leans over with her own glass of tea. She taps a triangular motif and whispers, "They say this one keeps out bad spirits." Then she lowers her voice conspiratorially. "But my aunt says it's actually meant to represent goat ears." Your eyebrows shoot up. "Goat ears?" She nods earnestly. Historians still argue whether some of these shapes began as protective symbols or animal references, she says with a proud, scholarly tone. You grin. Of course they do. Somewhere in a quiet academic office, someone is passionately debating the geometry of goat ears. Another artisan, a woman with laugh lines as deep as embroidery stitches, reaches for the carpet and points to a set of angular lines. "This is a path," she explains. "A guide." When caravans crossed the desert at night, some would bring rugs like this. They said the symbols could help you remember the right direction. You blink. Like a woolen GPS. She laughs, nearly spilling her tea. Yes. Except you do not need to update the software. You take another sip of your mint tea, letting the warmth rest on your tongue while your fingers gently explore the raised wool surfaces. The carpet feels alive with texture, the way each knot lifts slightly from the surface, how the patterns create shadows that shift with the light. Your earlier knots suddenly feel like part of a much bigger conversation. As the artisans talk, you become aware of the quiet hum of companionship here. No hurry. No timetable. Just tea, wool, symbols, and sunlight. The afternoon light pours through the narrow workshop windows, painting golden bars across the carpets and across everyone's faces. You notice dust motes drifting lazily in the beams, like tiny dancers swirling through the air. Someone passes a small plate of almond cookies, crisp, powdered sugar dusting your fingers, and you take one gratefully. The combination of sweetness, mint, and warm wool-scented air is strangely perfect. You try not to inhale crumbs directly into your windpipe, because nothing kills the peaceful vibe like a high-stakes coughing fit. The group relaxes further. Stories begin to flow with the tea. An older man, the workshop's dyer, joins in, leaning on a carved cane that has definitely seen a few decades of use. He recounts, with calm pride, how certain rug patterns used to signal a weaver's tribe or region. You could read a carpet like a map, he says, if you knew how. He points to a hooked shape. This one? High plains. This zigzag here? That's mountain people. Then he takes a slow sip of tea. And this, he taps a spiral. This means the weaver was probably stubborn. You blink. Seriously? He chuckles. Maybe. Or maybe it is a symbol for water. Depends who you ask. He winks, and you can't help but laugh. Joke number 1 for this section slides naturally out. So basically carpets are ancient personality quizzes. A few artisans laugh, nodding in agreement. Yes, someone says, but more accurate. You run your hand lightly across the sampler rug again. The bumps, the curves, the microgeometry of the knots, they all feel like a language whose grammar you're just beginning to understand. You sense meaning loud beneath meaning. One artisan shares how some older weavers used to intentionally hide a mistake in their carpets, not because they slipped, but because they believed only the divine could make something perfect. So a tiny, deliberate asymmetry was a way of acknowledging humility. You instinctively look back at your own earlier knot rows and wonder whether your wonky first knots unintentionally made your section extremely holy. Your tea cools slowly in your hands. The tray is refilled. Someone passes you a second cookie, dangerous, because they crumble if you blink too aggressively. The workshop relaxes further, the sharp discipline of weaving giving way to the loose, flowing warmth of conversation. One of the apprentices brings out a stack of finished carpets folded neatly in a woven basket. She sets them nearby so the group can examine the designs. You lean in with them, admiring how colors blend into each other like conversations laid over time. You spot familiar motifs, the diamonds, the zigzags, the little comb-like shapes that look like mountains or maybe hair. You feel comforted that the same designs persist across pieces, like collective memories preserved in wool. The master weaver catches your eye and gestures toward the patch of knots you made earlier. You'll understand these better now, she says. Patterns are not just shapes. They are pauses, thoughts, moments. You nod slowly. You feel that truth in your chest. Then, in a softer voice, she adds, and every break, every shared tea, makes the weaving stronger. Around you, the workshop glow deepens as the afternoon light grows warmer, settling into oranges and ambers. Shadows lengthen across the patterned floors. The looms keep working softly. You sip your tea again, savoring its sweetness, its warmth, and the way the clinking of glasses blends with the distant rustle of wool. It is a tea break, yes. But it is also a lesson. A pause woven tightly into the larger tapestry of the day. And as the last sips vanish and the cushions shift, you feel ready, calmer, steadier, for whatever the workshop offers next. You rise from the tea circle feeling a pleasant looseness in your limbs, like your joints have finally decided to trust you again. The warmth of mint and sugar still rests on your tongue as you wander toward a corner of the workshop you haven't yet explored. Sunlight falls in slanted amber beams across stacked carpets, dozens of them, folded like quiet archives. Each fold reveals a whisper of color. Burnt saffron, deep indigo, that luminous pomegranate red that you helped knot into existence earlier. Patterns peek from edges like shy storytellers waiting to be asked. The master weaver joins you with a small, knowing smile. She taps a folded rug near the top of the stack. This one, she says. This has traveled. You raise an eyebrow. Rugs travel? You picture one strolling casually down a city street, maybe wearing sunglasses. She sees your expression and chuckles. With a gentle tug, she unfolds the first third of the carpet, revealing sweeping zigzags bordered by dotted lines, like a stylized horizon with stars stitched into its edges. This went with my uncle, she explains. On a caravan. A mainstream historical fact slips comfortably into your mind. For centuries, Berber carpets were not just household items but tradable goods of serious value. Merchants carried them along caravan routes stretching from the Sahara to the Mediterranean, from Marrakesh across mountain passes to port cities like Tangier and later Marseille. Rugs were portable wealth, rolled tightly and strapped onto camels alongside salt, spices, and the hopes of entire villages. The master weaver lays the carpet fully open across the floor. Its colors glow in the soft afternoon light. You crouch beside her, fingertips hovering just above the wall, almost touching. Merchants brought back stories, she continues, and sometimes brought back new designs. You lean back slightly, surprised. Like design exchange programs. She laughs gently. Yes, something like that. A trader would see a pattern in another village, or even another country, and ask for it to be woven back home. Sometimes they described it from memory. She taps a crooked zigzag. Sometimes the memory was not perfect. You grin. Mistakes as artifacts, human history in woolly form. As she folds the carpet again, she gestures toward a worn leather stole bag hanging on a peg. Its edges are frayed, its surface cracked with age. This belonged to him too, she says. He carried the carpets rolled inside. You walk over and run your palm gently across the leather. It feels like holding a sunset that's been trapped in material form, warm, faded, and full of stories. She tells you that some traders specialized in Berber rugs, learning the symbols well enough to explain them convincingly to foreign buyers. Not always correctly, she adds, a small smirk tugging her lips. But convincingly. Across the workshop, one of the older artisans overhears and chimes in. In Marseille, they used to say the zigzags meant ocean waves, he says. But here they mean mountains. He shrugs. Depends who is buying. Historians still argue whether certain motifs that spread across North Africa and Europe did so through trade, migration, or independent origin. You look down at the carpet and wonder how many symbols in the world are misunderstood survivors of long, confusing journeys. Probably more than a few. You ask how long the caravan journeys took. He shakes his head slowly. Weeks. Sometimes months. You imagine trekking across burning dunes, sleeping under star-bleached skies, counting time by the shifting shadows of dunes and the slow sway of a camel's gait. It feels epic, like something you'd attempt once and then brag about for the rest of your life. He gestures toward the doorway where sunlight spills in. The carpets left villages like ours, he says. They crossed mountains, plains, palaces. They saw more of the world than some people did. Your mind floats with the idea of a carpet gaining a kind of passport stamp each time its edges brushed a new landscape. Joke number one emerges naturally. So the carpets were basically influences before influencers. The artisan snorts. Yes, but more useful. You study the patterns again. They look different now, knowing they've been shaped by travel, by sandstorms, marketplaces, and the bargaining of merchants who probably drank terribly strong coffee. Another weaver joins you, carrying a rolled carpet under her arm. She unrolls it delicately at your feet. This one is older, its colors more muted, its wool slightly flattened from years of footsteps and admiration. She points to a jagged border motif. This, she says, is from the southern valleys. A merchant brought it north, and many weavers copied it. Sometimes merchants were so fond of certain carpets that, instead of selling them, they kept them as sleeping mats during their travels. The oils from their skins softened the wool over time, giving some carpets a distinctive silky texture. You imagine a merchant snoozing blissfully on a masterpiece worth several goats, or maybe even a small cow, and the thought makes you smile. You trace the softened fibers. They feel like velvet that has survived a long, adventurous life. The master weaver settles beside you again, folding her legs gracefully. Travel changes patterns, she says. But it also changes the people who carry them. Her voice grows quieter, more reflective. She explains how merchants, upon returning home, sometimes carried not just new motifs but new stories, new cooking spices, even new jokes. My father brought back a joke from Algeria once, she says. We still tell it. I think we tell it incorrectly now. You grin. As is tradition. She nods solemnly, playing along. You look around the workshop at the finished carpets hanging like tapestries along the wall. Each one contains not only local identity but the faint fingerprints of faraway places. Travelers left, patterns shifted, families learned, villages adapted. A pattern might originate in a mountain village but acquire a twist from a coastal town 2 borders away. A color might shift because a new mineral pigment arrived along a trade route. A symbol might change meaning entirely after enough miles. You get the sense that a carpet is not just woven wool, it's a woven conversation. And you're beginning to understand the dialect. A few children from the village wander into the workshop, their sandals slapping softly on the floor. One boy sits cross-legged beside a rug and starts tracing its motifs with his fingertip as if following a treasure map. Another girl tugs at her mother's sleeve and asks, "Did this one go far?" Her mother nods. "Further than your uncle." You can't help but laugh at that. Joke number 2 for the section. The sun drifts lower. The workshop warms with a richer, honeyed gold. The edges of carpets glow as if lit from within. Outside, you hear faint voices, merchants, perhaps, or villagers heading home. The air holds the scent of warm wool and thyme. The master weaver gently rolls up the carpet you've been admiring and hands it to an apprentice. "This one will travel soon," she says. "But not too far." She looks at you meaningfully. "Maybe you'll see it again." You blink, caught off guard by the unexpected sweetness of the thought. The carpet as a companion on the road, a little piece of this calm workshop following you somewhere in your future. Another artisan brings over a folded blanket of undyed wool, offering it for you to sit on. You sink onto it gratefully. From this low vantage point, the stacked carpets look like a cliff face of color and stories. You take a deep breath. Even the dust smells like travel, sun-warmed particles waiting to drift. You run your fingers across the border of a nearby rug. Its raised knots feel like gentle landscape ridges. You imagine yourself walking across them like foothills. Then you lean back slightly and allow yourself a small, quiet sigh. The weight of centuries and journeys sits gently beside you. It doesn't press, it simply shares the space. You're ready for whatever the workshop reveals next. You step toward the open doorway where a warm wash of late afternoon light spills in, soft as honey. The workshop behind you hums with quiet rhythmic weaving, but out here, the threshold between indoors and out, the world loosens its shoulders. A breeze lifts the edge of a hanging carpet, making it sway like a slow nod. You take that as permission to wander. The village unfurls before you in layers, clay brick walls glowing amber beneath the sun, narrow lanes twisting like threads in a braid, kids laughing as they dart between doorways, and rooftops where laundry flutters like tiny celebratory flags. You step outside, and the first thing you notice is the sound. It's not loud, not even close, but it is full. Women chatting as they carry baskets, a few goats bleating as if providing their own commentary, distant pots clinking, and, weaving between everything, the faint pulse of looms echoing from neighboring houses. A chorus of everyday life. You take a breath. The air tastes like dust warmed by sunlight and maybe a little cumin drifting from someone's cooking pot. The village is alive in a way that slides easily under your skin. You start walking, shoes crunching softly on the packed earth. Behind you, the workshop's open door lets the weaving sounds spill out. They mingle with the village noises, synthesizing, blending, aligning into a single warm symphony. You realize the clack of the loom isn't mechanical at all but deeply human, beating in time with footfalls and laughter and the flutter of laundry above. You pass a courtyard where 3 older men sit on low stools, arguing amiably over a board game that appears to involve small stones and dramatic hand gestures. One of them waves at you as you pass and calls something that probably means, "Come play," or possibly, "Watch me absolutely destroy my friend here." You smile and wave back, resisting the temptation to join, partly because you don't know the rules, and partly because you suspect losing spectacularly would become an instant village legend. As you continue walking, a little girl approaches, dragging an oversized broom twice her height. She looks you up and down with narrowed eyes, the way kids do when evaluating whether you're trustworthy or deeply suspicious. After a long inspection, she nods once and marches off. Joke number 1 for the section tumbles out of you silently. Good news, you've been officially certified as not a threat by the tiny broom authority. You glance up the lane, where a woman shakes a carpet vigorously over a balcony rail. Dust bursts into the sunlight like glitter. Glitter that will absolutely make you sneeze if you breathe too aggressively. You hold your breath just in case. The woman sees you looking and smiles warmly. "For the festival," she calls. Her accent rolls like smooth stones. She nods toward the market square ahead. You go. You'll hear music. So of course, you go. You reach the small square just as a group of teenagers begins tapping out a steady rhythm on hand drums. Nothing formal, nothing rehearsed, just the kind of spontaneous afternoon music making that happens when homework is optional and someone remembered to bring a drum. Their beats mingle with the loom echoes drifting from the workshop row. The rhythms intertwine in a way that feels almost intentional. You pause, listening to both, the artisan's pulse and the village's heartbeat coexisting in the warm air. A mainstream historical fact wakes up in your brain. In many Berber communities, weaving wasn't a solitary craft but part of a larger soundscape. Weavers often worked accompanied by humming or rhythmic foot tapping, and sometimes villages timed tasks around shared beats so that distant looms aligned into communal rhythms. You realize you're hearing a modern echo of that tradition now, the collective choreography of daily life. You continue strolling, letting the sounds guide you. Goats complaining, drums humming, looms clicking, wind chiming through ceramic pots. The moment feels both ancient and almost cinematic, like someone pressed play on a soundtrack designed specifically to soothe you. A young man repairing a bicycle tire waves you over. He gestures toward the workshop's direction. You learning weaving? You shrug a little, modest. Trying. He grins. Harder than it looks, eh? You laugh. Much. He nods knowingly. First rug I tried to weave looked like a confused octopus. Joke number 2 arrives naturally. Honestly, I'd be impressed if mine looked even remotely lifelike. He laughs loud enough that a nearby chicken startles and flaps indignantly across the street, as if offended on behalf of octopuses everywhere. You walk on until the village's sounds begin to blend into something softer, like the background soundtrack of an ASMR video with a slight dust filter. You find yourself drifting toward a stone bench shaded by an olive tree. Its branches shimmer with silver-green leaves that cast dancing shadows on the ground. You sit, feeling the stone warm beneath you. From here, the workshop sits perfectly within view, its doorway open, its looms pulsing in steady intervals. It looks like a heart inside a village-shaped chest. You watch a pair of women pass by carrying large woven baskets balanced effortlessly on their hips. One tells a story animatedly, the other laughs until she nearly drops her basket. You can't understand the words, but the meaning floats easily through tone, gesture, and the familiar language of mischievous gossip. It's comforting, like hearing a lullaby in a language you don't speak but somehow still understand. Another villager, an elderly man wearing a hat that has definitely lived many lives, approaches your bench slowly. He stops, gestures at the workshop, and says in a raspy voice, "Good sound today." You nod. "Very good." He points at the looms again. "When I was boy, sound was louder. Everyone weaving. All day. Even nights sometimes." He sighs peacefully, leaning on his cane. Historians still argue whether weaving came to this region through ancient traders or older nomadic tribes, he says offhandedly, as if this is the sort of thing one brings up on a casual afternoon walk. But I say, it came from need. To stay warm. To stay proud. He taps his cane lightly. Need always stronger than history. You blink slowly. That's unexpectedly poetic. Joke number 3 forms gently. If all historians spoke like that, I would have actually enjoyed my textbooks. He chuckles, a soft, papery laugh, and continues walking down the lane. The workshop's rhythmic clicking floats across the village again, now melding smoothly with distant bird calls. A pair of swallows darts above you, stitching the air with little arcs that remind you of the geometric motifs on carpets. You wonder whether ancient weavers mirrored the flight of birds or whether you're just seeing patterns everywhere now because you've spent hours staring at wool. A dog wanders over, sniffs your shoe, decides you're harmless, and plops down beside your bench with a dramatic sigh. You consider this another official certification. The sun slides lower, turning rooftops soft orange. Shadows lengthen across walls. The village lets out a collective exhale, the afternoon winding slowly toward evening. You feel your own breath aligning with the gentle slowing of the world around you. Something shifts inside you, a quiet, grounded sensation. Maybe it's the warmth of the tea earlier, or the rhythmic knots you tied, or the soft hum of life pulsing around you. But you feel woven in. Part of the pattern, even if just for this afternoon. You stand at last, giving the bench a grateful pat and the dog a gentle scratch behind the ears. The workshop calls you back with its comforting, steady voice. As you step into the golden light, the chorus of village sounds follows. Footsteps, chatter, clinks, bleats, distant laughter, all merging seamlessly with the familiar heartbeat of the looms. You walk toward that pulse, feeling the rhythm inside your chest echo it. The day isn't finished yet. And neither is your place in this unfolding tapestry. You slip back into the workshop just as the sun drifts lower, turning the room into a warm amber chamber. The light pours in at an angle now, catching on floating wool fibers like tiny lanterns drifting lazily through the air. Behind the first loom, the master weaver lifts his head, eyes narrowing slightly, not in disapproval, but in that way craftsmen do when deciding whether to let you off easy or challenge you for sport. He crooks a finger. "Come," he says, voice smooth as worn leather. "Your eyes, we test them now." Oh good. Nothing like an impromptu exam to keep your heart rate nice and elevated for this very soothing bedtime story. You walk toward him anyway, because this is the kind of test that comes with gentle teasing instead of scantron sheets. The master sits on a low stool beside an unfinished carpet bursting with intricate Amazigh motifs, diamonds, stepped shapes, and zigzags like tiny mountains. He pats the spot next to him, and you sit, crossing your legs carefully as if the carpet might judge your posture. His hands move quickly over a basket of dyed yarn, pulling out 2 strands that look, at least to your untrained eyes, exactly the same color. He lifts them slowly. "Which belongs here?" he asks, pointing at a small gap in the pattern. You lean in, squint, tilt your head, hold your breath for absolutely no reason, then squint harder. Both strands look like reddish-brown. Or maybe brownish-red. Or maybe the color that happens when your phone screen brightness is at 2% and you're just guessing vibes. You point tentatively to the left yarn. He raises an eyebrow. "Bold choice." You clear your throat. Is it wrong? He shrugs. Historians still argue whether this hue comes from walnut shells or from madder root mixed with iron. You blink. That didn't answer my question. He grins mischievously. Yes, it's wrong. Joke number 1 manifests almost reflexively. Great. Good to know my eyeballs are mainly decorative. The master weaver laughs, a deep rolling chuckle that vibrates the air. He pats your shoulder. Look again. You must see not color, intention. You stare at the yarns again, trying not to overthink what intention looks like. Slowly, you notice one strand has ever so slightly more saturated warmth, like a sunbeam caught at dawn. The other appears cooler, dusty, almost shy. The pattern space where it needs to go carries a faint echo of the warmer shade. You tap the correct one, and this time he nods. You're learning, he says. Color is story. Story is thread. He lifts a new bundle of wool and explains how Amazigh patterns carry generational memory. Symbols for protection, fertility, mountains, journeys, and even jokes slipped in by mischievous weavers centuries ago. Some weavers used to intentionally include a single mistake knot, a symbolic gesture that perfection belongs only to the divine. You look down at your previous errors and think, in that case, my weaving is extremely spiritual. He gestures for you to take his place at the loom, not fully, but close enough to feel the weight of responsibility. The wooden frame looms, pun not avoided, before you, its warp threads taut like the strings of a quiet instrument. The master weaver hands you the shuttle with ceremonial seriousness. Now, he says, a few knots. You inhale softly. Your fingers move with exaggerated caution, trying to remember how he wrapped the wool, how he tightened each knot with a firm but gentle tug. You attempt your first knot. It looks acceptable. Then the second. Then the third. Ah, he bursts out laughing. This one is enthusiastic. You glance at the knot. Yes, enthusiastic is one word. Another is chaotic energy condensed into wool. You try again, slower this time, letting your hands fall into the loom's rhythm. Something shifts. The workshop's pulse becomes your pulse. The motion becomes smoother, more natural. You stop thinking about technique and start feeling it. The master nods. Good. You listen with your hands. He pulls a sample carpet from a shelf to show you symmetry, how even slight imbalance shifts the whole visual flow. Then he challenges you to find the single intentional asymmetry he placed in the piece 20 years ago. You study the patterns, repeating diamonds, recurring zigzags, alternating shapes that tell stories you can't quite translate. Then you spot it. One smaller motif slightly off-center, almost bashful. There, you say, pointing. His eyes twinkle. Very good. You puff out your chest, just a little. I am a natural. He tilts his hand. Maybe someday. Joke number 2 finds its opening. Great, so I'm currently at the level of promising zucchini. He smiles knowingly and hands you a magnifying glass. Yes, a real magnifying glass, explaining how seasoned weavers inspect their own work for tension irregularities. You pretend to examine your earlier knots with fierce professional intensity, like a detective in a wool-themed mystery novel. Spoiler: the evidence is incriminating. He then tells you a mainstream historical fact. Many Berber weaving traditions were passed from mother to daughter, and a girl's first rug was often part of her dowry. These rugs weren't merely floor coverings, they were identity documents woven in wool, carrying clan symbols and personal motifs that traveled with women when they married. You nod thoughtfully, letting that weight sink in. You're holding not just thread but generations of expression. The master leans back, lighting the room with a tale about traveling merchants who once tested apprentice weavers with trick questions about symmetry. Things like, how many variations can this motif have while still being considered the same? It's basically the artisanal version of asking, is a hot dog a sandwich? But with more cultural stakes. You attempt a few more knots, and each comes easier than the last. Your breathing slows. Your shoulders drop. The loom's rhythm becomes a soft companion. The master watches you with an approving glint. Good, he murmurs. Now you see pattern. Soon you'll see story. You smile, feeling a little taller, a little more woven into this place. Then he adds, but maybe don't sell your carpets just yet. You snort softly. Noted. Joke number 3 slides in gently. I'll hold off on launching my luxury rug empire, for now. The master pats your arm and rises to stretch his back, joints cracking like soft firewood. He steps aside, letting you continue practicing while he observes silently. The workshop grows quieter as other weavers take breaks or sip tea in the corners, leaving only the gentle clack of your loom and the whisper of wool sliding through your fingers. You're not perfect, not even close, but you're part of the pattern now. And that feels like something worth weaving into memory. The master weaver steps away, leaving you with the loom's gentle heartbeat still echoing in your fingertips. But as the rhythm settles, you become aware of something else, a softer, more deliberate sound coming from the far side of the workshop. It's the whisper of scissors, the quiet sigh of thread being coaxed rather than pulled, the unmistakable tone of someone persuading time itself to behave. You rise, brushing stray wool from your clothes, and wander toward the sound. A wide wooden table sits beneath a window, sunlight fanning across it like a stage light. Upon that stage rests an older carpet, faded, frayed, edges curled like tired fingers. Its colors have mellowed into a soft harmony of rust, ochre, and midnight blue. A woman in her late 60s sits beside it, tools arranged in a neat semicircle, needles, wool tufts, a tiny comb, scissors that gleam with the authority of decades. She looks up at you with eyes that feel like they've seen every thread since the Bronze Age. Come, she says, waving you closer without pausing her slow, precise work. This one has stories to mend. You step beside her as she lifts a small section of the carpet, revealing an area where the threads have worn thin. Goats, she explains. Always goats. They think carpets are snacks. You nod with gravity. Fearsome beasts. She chuckles. You have no idea. Joke number 1 slips in naturally. You make a mental note that if you ever own a beautiful handmade carpet, you should probably keep it far from goats, and maybe toddlers, since the two have similar snack-related instincts. The woman picks up a faded strand of wool and holds it beside a basket of dyed yarn, searching for a match. She explains that repairing an old carpet isn't just stitching, it's archaeology. Every fix must respect age, pattern, tension, and history. You realize she isn't just mending fiber, she's restoring memory. She slides a thread through the fabric, her hands moving in gentle, practiced arcs. You watch, entranced. She gestures for you to sit. You may help, she says. Only a little. But enough. You sit carefully, afraid to even breathe too close to the delicate relic. She hands you a piece of wool no longer than your thumb. Here, she says. We re-knot. Only 1. Maybe 2. You thread the wool through your fingers, feeling how different it is from the fresh fibers you used earlier. This is soft with age, weary in a way that makes you want to tuck it beneath a blanket. You lean closer to see where she points, an area where a small patch of knots has come undone. You place the wool gently, mimic the knotting motion she showed you moments ago, and tuck the thread into place. It sits slightly crooked. You look at her apologetically. Should it look like that? She inspects it with exaggerated seriousness and then shrugs. Historians still argue whether carpets should be perfect or simply honest. You blink. Is that your kind way of saying my knot is terrible? Terrible? No. It is. She makes a twisting gesture. Charming. You accept this with the dignity of someone whose knot has just been granted a personality instead of corrected. She leans back and begins telling you about the history of carpet repair in the region. A mainstream historical fact emerges. For centuries, caravan routes brought not only merchandise but also damaged textiles from faraway lands. Berber artisans became known for their ability to restore even Persian or Ottoman pieces using local materials. You imagine a lonely rug rolling across the desert on a camel, whispering "help me" in thread language until it reaches a village like this one. She taps a particularly faded section. This motif here? Old. Very old. You lean in, recognizing the diamond shape you've seen on many carpets today. But this one is softer, more irregular. Some say it is symbol of protection, she continues. Others say it is path of ancestors. And still others say, she lowers her voice conspiratorially, it is just a nice shape someone liked 400 years ago. You grin. Highly scholarly. She winks. The best scholarship is sometimes guesswork delivered confidently. Joke number 2 slides into place. You instantly realize you've just discovered the secret methodology behind every group project presentation you ever gave. She resumes her work, showing you how she carefully trims loose ends so the repair blends in visibly. Each cut is a whisper, each knot a heartbeat. You find yourself hypnotized by the tiny motions. Snip, pull, pat, comb. Each action a reminder that mending is its own kind of storytelling. She pauses to flex her hands, shaking out the stiffness. These fingers, she sighs, have repaired hundreds of carpets. Maybe thousands. You ask if she has a favorite. She smiles softly. Not a single one. But I remember the people who brought them. A man who carried his grandmother's rug across mountains. A young bride who wanted her dowry piece restored before her wedding day. A merchant who tripped over his own display and blamed the wind. She laughs. No wind that day. Very still. The conversation flows as seamlessly as her needle. Then she asks you to hold the corner of the carpet steady while she reattaches a fringe. You grip gently, letting the old wool rest against your palms. Something about the touch feels grounding, like shaking hands with the past. She murmurs as she works. In some villages, fringes weren't just decorative, they were believed to confuse wandering spirits so they wouldn't follow you home. You glance at the fringe with newfound respect. Excellent, you think. A paranormal defense system made of tassels. Truly the pinnacle of design. She completes the repair with a final press of her palm. The worn section looks whole again, still old, still softened by time, but no longer wounded. You're struck by how subtle the change is, yet how significant. You exhale slowly. That's beautiful. She nods. Carpets age like people. They wrinkle. They fade. But with care, she pats the repaired section. They keep their stories. You help her roll the carpet gently and place it on a shelf with others awaiting repair or pickup. As you do, light filters through the window, illuminating dust motes that swirl around the restored piece like tiny dancers celebrating its renewal. The woman settles back on her stool with a satisfied sigh. Good work today, she tells you. You smile. Thank you for letting me help. She waves a hand. Every hand learns. Every thread remembers. Joke number 3 emerges softly. You're not saying you're ready to open a vintage carpet restoration shop, but you're also not ready. She chuckles, reading your expression perfectly. The workshop feels different now, quieter, softer, wiser. You sense that you've crossed into a deeper layer of the craft, one where time isn't the enemy but a collaborator. Mending, weaving, repairing, it's all the same language, spoken at different speeds. You step away from the table, letting the repaired carpet rest, and feel a renewed warmth spreading through the workshop. The day continues to drift, and you allow yourself to drift with it. The workshop grows a little louder again as the last of the sun's light warms the walls. A few artisans return from breaks, carrying small glasses of mint tea or baskets of wool. The newly repaired carpet rests peacefully on its shelf, and the master weaver gives you an approving nod as he passes, like a teacher reluctantly admitting you did, in fact, remember the homework. But another kind of energy stares in the corner of the room, where two low stools face each other with an air of casual ceremony. On one stool sits a middle-aged merchant with a neatly trimmed beard and a vest so embroidered it could probably file its own tax return. On the other stool sits a customer, or potential customer, leaning forward with that intense expression people get when they're trying to mask curiosity under a facade of indifference. You wander closer, drawn by the hum of conversation. The merchant spots you and flashes a grin. "Ah, perfect timing," he says. "Come. You will witness the ancient art of bartering." You blink. "Am I qualified to witness that?" He shrugs. "Sure. Why not? Just don't laugh at the wrong moment." You sit cross-legged nearby, pretending to casually examine a basket of yarn while actually tuning every sense to the drama unfolding beside you. The merchant lifts a folded carpet and drapes it across a wooden rail with practiced showmanship. The colors glow under the fading light: terracotta, indigo, saffron, all arranged in a pattern that looks both geometric and somehow musical. "This piece," the merchant announces grandly, "comes from a village that sits so high in the mountains even the goats complain." The customer snorts, trying not to smile. Joke number one surfaces in your mind. Honestly, any place that even goats think is too much effort should definitely earn bonus points. The merchant then launches into a story about the weaver, a woman whose grandmother taught her the art, whose daughter is learning now, whose loom sits beside a window overlooking a valley where the wind sings year-round. It's a bit theatrical, but not in a dishonest way. More like a storyteller who genuinely can't help dramatizing reality. You notice something subtle. The customer's fingers keep drifting toward the corner of the carpet, brushing it occasionally as if testing the wall without admitting he's intrigued. You file this away, feeling very Sherlock Holmes about it. The merchant names his price. The customer inhales sharply, sits back, folds arms. A classic move. The merchant nods sagely, as though he has expected this reaction since birth. The negotiation begins. What fascinates you is the rhythm. It's not a battle, it's a dance. A step forward, a step back. Compliments disguised as criticisms, criticism disguised as interest. The merchant praises the man's discerning taste. The customer claims he has no taste at all and is merely buying a gift. The merchant insists discerning people always say that. The customer protests again. You whisper to yourself, this is basically flirting but with wool. And indeed, there's a playfulness to the whole thing. Not deception, performance. Respect wrapped in humor. The price drops by a small amount. The customer counters. The merchant sighs dramatically. A nearby artisan rolls her eyes but smiles fondly at the familiarity of it all. A mainstream historical fact floats to mind. In many North African markets, haggling wasn't just about settling on a price, it was a social ritual that built relationships. Merchants became storytellers, customers became sparring partners, and the final agreement wasn't merely a transaction but a shared experience that cemented mutual respect. Some merchants even judged the character of a buyer based on how gracefully they negotiated, not whether they paid more or less, but how they carried themselves. You watch as the merchant steps aside, letting the customer run his fingers through the pile of the carpet. He explains how the dyes were made from local plants, walnut hulls, pomegranate rind, safflower. A few generations back, a certain dye master swore he achieved perfect golden tones by singing to the wool. Whether the singing helped or not remains unknown, but the village banned him from singing anyway because he apparently sounded like a goat with creative ambitions. Joke number 2 settles perfectly into place. You briefly imagine a wool dyer belting out love ballads to a bucket of yarn, and frankly, you respect the commitment. The merchant folds the carpet again, smoothing its edges with pride. The customer's eyes linger, and the dance continues. You notice the subtle cues, the slight tilt of the merchant's head, the way the customer pinches the corner to test density, the exaggerated size meant to signal, you drive too hard a bargain, even though both men appear to be having an excellent time. Finally, after another round of negotiation marked by good-natured teasing and the occasional "my cousin can get it cheaper in fees" bluff, to which the merchant responds with a dramatic gasp and a hand to his heart, they settle on a price. The merchant claps his hands once, delighted. The customer grins despite himself. A short silence follows, the kind that says, "That was fun." Then the merchant nods toward you. "Our witness here has seen many things," he declares. You blink. "I have." "Yes," he insists. "You saw fairness, honesty, and maybe a little theater." You smile. "Definitely the theater." He beams. As the customer leaves with his neatly wrapped carpet, the merchant leans toward you. "Bartering," he says, "isn't to cheat. It's to meet." He taps his temple lightly, head to head. Then his heart. And sometimes heart to heart. You nod, absorbing the wisdom. And then he adds, "Also, it keeps me entertained during slow afternoons." Which is probably the most honest line of the entire negotiation. He lets out a sigh of satisfaction and pours 2 cups of mint tea, one for himself, one for you. You sip and let the sweetness coat your tongue. The workshop hums around you again. The rhythmic beating of the loom syncs with the low murmur of artisans chatting nearby. The merchant gestures toward another folded rug. "You see this one?" he asks. "Beautiful, but impossible to sell." "Why?" He sighs dramatically. "Because it is too beautiful." You arch an eyebrow. "That's your sales problem." "Yes. People see it, panic, and think, I cannot have something this perfect. I will spill soup on it immediately." Joke number 3 rolls out effortlessly. Honestly, you can't argue with that level of self-awareness. You've spilled soup on things you weren't even holding. The merchant bursts into laughter. He then shares a softer detail. Weaving families often collaborated during busy seasons, and some villages organized community barter days where artisans traded pieces with each other rather than selling for money. Sometimes a family would leave with a new blanket, baskets, tools, or spices, each transaction a web of mutual support. He lifts his tea glass toward you. "This is trade," he says. "Not just things. People. Stories. Respect." The workshop glows with the last ribbons of sunlight. You feel woven into the space again, threaded through the laughter, the deals struck, the mismatched colors, the repaired fringes, the patterns unfolding knot by knot. The merchant leans back and sighs contentedly. "You're learning," he says. "One day, maybe you will negotiate better than me." You grin. "One day, maybe I won't panic when someone asks me to pick the correct shade of brown." He pats your shoulder. "Small goals first." The evening deepens. The workshop warms. And you, nestled among the quiet dealings of the day, feel like a thread being gently pulled into the tapestry. The merchant's laughter drifts behind you like a warm afternote as you step deeper into the workshop again, where the afternoon's glow has mellowed into that soft transitional light, half sun, half shadow, the kind that paints everything in gentle gold. It's the hour when work slows not because anyone tells it to, but because the day itself begins to exhale. You sense movement near the back wall where finished carpets hang like a library of stories. A couple of artisans gather there, brushing, trimming, smoothing, applying the final touches that turn a woven piece into something ready to meet the world. You drift toward them instinctively, drawn by the hush of concentrated hands. One artisan, a woman about your age with a streak of silver in her braid, holds a nearly completed carpet across her lap. Its colors flow together like a sunset poured through a prism, reds fading into ochre, blues threading into soft creams. She runs a small metal comb across the surface with deliberate strokes, coaxing the wool into even fluff. Each pass releases a faint cloud of fibers that dance briefly in the golden air before vanishing. She glances up and smiles. "Come see," she says. "It's almost ready." You kneel beside her, careful not to crush the soft pile. Up close, the detail is astonishing. Tiny, perfect knots forming crisp geometric shapes, lines that hold steady as a heartbeat, motifs repeating like whispered incantations. You brush your fingers lightly over the wool, surprised at how springy and warm it feels, almost alive, like a creature that's been quietly breathing its way into existence. "It took 3 months," the woman says, continuing to trim small threads with sharp scissors. "Longer than usual. The weaver wanted it perfect for her daughter." You nod. There's something tender about that. Craft as love, material as memory. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your thoughts. In many Amazigh communities, women wove special carpets for life milestones, marriage, births, or even to decorate a new home. These weren't gifts purchased last minute. They were painstakingly built expressions of care, sometimes begun years before the recipient even knew they were coming. You look at the nearly finished piece with a new sense of reverence. The woman notices your awe. "Here," she says, handing you the comb. "Try." Your immediate thought, "I should absolutely not be trusted with this." Your second thought, "Well, here we go." You take the comb gingerly and make a slow, careful stroke across a small section. The wool aligns obediently, puffing up slightly, and you exhale in relief. She nods approvingly. "Good. You have gentle hands." Joke number 1 floats out before you can stop it. "Thank you. I practice on potted plants that are afraid of commitment." She laughs, a soft sound like bells in another room. Another artisan joins you, carrying small shears designed for precise trimming. He demonstrates how the edges are evened out, quick snips along the perimeter, creating a clean silhouette. You watch the way he handles the tool, confident, deft, yet somehow affectionate. He offers the shears to you, eyebrow raised. "Would you like to try?" You blink. "You trust me with sharp instruments near your hard work." He shrugs. "Only a little. But enough." You accept and carefully trim along a tiny section. The shear blades whisper as they cut, leaving a crisp line behind. You hold your breath the entire time, like the carpet might judge you if you exhale too forcefully. When you finish, the artisan inspects your work and gives a half nod. "Not bad," he says. "A little wobbly, but not bad." You grin. "I'll take wobbly." He smirks. "Most people do." He returns to his work, brushing the fringe with the kind of tender efficiency that makes you think he's done this every day since birth. He points to the fringe. Some older carpets included little knots tied by children who wanted to add luck to the piece. Sometimes these knots were intentional blessings. Other times, frankly, the kids were probably just bored and playing with string. Joke number 2 arrives promptly. You briefly envy those kids for being allowed to tie chaos knots into expensive carpets without consequences. The woman motions you closer again and flips a corner of the carpet to show the backside, the hidden architecture where every knot's tail lies tucked neatly. The back never lies, she says. It tells the truth about the weaver. You study the underside. Perfectly even rows, no loose threads, tension balanced like a practiced breath. You whistle softly. So this is like the rug's handwriting, you say. She nods. Exactly. Anyone can admire the front. But the back is where you know the truth. She lets the corner fall gently and continues brushing. You watch the carpet soften under her hands, becoming not just an object but a presence, something that carries the weight of hours, patience, and personality. Nearby, the master weaver approaches with a roll of twine and examines the almost finished piece. Good, he murmurs. Very good. She will be happy. He then pauses and tilts his head at you. You, he says, want to try the last knot. You blink. The last knot of the entire carpet. He nods solemnly. Yes. This is a lot of responsibility. What if your knot somehow summons bad luck? Or unravels the entire carpet? Or calls forth the ghost of that goat who eats rugs? The woman nudges you gently. Go on, she encourages. It will be fine. You take the final length of wool between your fingers. It's soft, warm, resilient. You place it at the end of the fringe, loop it carefully, pull the knot tight. It sits neatly, contentedly, like it knows it belongs. The artisans murmur approval. The master weaver smiles. There. Now you are part of it. Something warm flickers in your chest. You're woven into a carpet that may travel to another town, another country, another generation. A small imprint of your presence will move through the world long after this moment ends. He gestures for everyone to gather. The carpet is lifted carefully, one person at each corner, and hung on the wall with a soft, celebratory exhale. When the last corner is secured, the room pauses in quiet admiration. The colors glow. The pattern breathes. It looks complete. You can't help whispering, "Wow." The master nods. It's good work. And then, the finishing touch, he brushes the carpet one last time, slow and deliberate. The motion is so gentle it feels like a blessing. Joke number 3 whispers into place. You didn't expect brushing wool to feel spiritual, but here you are, one stroke away from starting your own meditation channel. The artisans laugh softly. Outside, the sky shifts toward deeper hues, rose, lavender, indigo. The workshop glows warmly within, the finished carpet standing proud among others. It's almost evening now. And your place in the workshop feels almost finished too. Almost. The final light of the afternoon leans long across the workshop floor, stretching itself like a cat that knows its day is almost done. You stand near the doorway, watching dust motes twirl lazily in the amber glow, each fleck drifting as if it has all the time in the world. And honestly, in a place like this, maybe it does. Time thickens here, slows to the tempo of wool, knots, breaths, and stories. Behind you, the newly finished carpet hangs proudly on the wall, its colors deepening as the sun dips lower. The reds warm into rust, the blues melt toward twilight, and the cream patterns catch the last glimmer like faint constellations stitched into fabric. You step closer, letting your fingertips graze the soft pile, still warm from the artisan's hands. It feels like touching something that has lived a small lifetime in the past several hours. Around the room, the artisans begin their gentle end-of-day rituals. A few sweep stray wool from the floor into neat piles. Others cover dye pots or fold tools into woven baskets. The loom you first approached this afternoon now sits dormant, its warp threads resting like quiet harp strings. Earlier, its rhythm pulsed through the room, now it sleeps. You walk toward the open doorway and peek outside. Sunset drapes over the village in long, velvety colors: burnt orange, pastel rose, smoky plum. Children's voices carry faintly from the distance, mingling with the soft bleating of goats heading home. A donkey cart clatters along the stone path, unbothered by the slow descent of dusk. You take a deep breath and catch a hint of wood smoke on the breeze, mixed with mint and something sweet you can't quite place. A mainstream historical fact floats up. In many Berber regions, workshops like this once functioned as communal hubs, spaces where weaving, storytelling, and trade intersected. Carpets weren't just commodities, they were cultural messages, sometimes even silent maps of lineage, identity, and movement. You picture centuries of afternoons like this one, each with different faces but the same golden haze. Behind you, someone clears their throat softly. It's the master weaver. His hands are folded behind his back, his posture relaxed in that dignified, effortless way he has. "It is good that you stayed until the end," he says. "Many visitors leave before the sun finishes its work." You smile. "I didn't want to miss this part." He nods knowingly. The day is honest now. Nothing hides in the evening light. You wonder what he means, but before you can ask, he gestures for you to follow. You step beside him as he leads you to the back area where finished carpets lie rolled, stacked, or hung. The air smells faintly of cedar and lanolin, comforting in a homely, humble way. He stops beside an older carpet rolled against the wall and unfastens the ties. With slow reverence, he unfurls it across the floor. The wall has softened with age, the colors mellowed but still rich. You crouch down to admire the intricate patterns. Diamonds within diamonds, chevrons branching like mountain paths, tiny motifs repeating in a quiet rhythm. "This one," he says, "was woven by my grandmother." You look up sharply. "Really?" He nods. "More than 70 years ago." His voice carries a softness you haven't heard before. "She taught me everything I know. And she learned from her mother." And so on. His hand sweeps gently across the surface of the carpet. "When we weave, we don't work alone." A phrase slips into your mind, one that fits the moment too well. Historians still argue whether weaving began primarily as necessity or as artistic expression. But watching the way he looks at his grandmother's work, it's clear the question barely matters. In this room, necessity and art are inseparable partners dancing the same patient dance. You trace the carpet's border, noticing the slight irregularities that mark it as handmade. "It's beautiful," you whisper. The master weaver gives a small smile. She would have liked to hear that. He rolls the carpet back up and ties it again, almost like tucking in a child. Then he looks at you with gentle amusement. "Do you know what she used to say?" You shake your head. He raises a finger. "A carpet is like a person. You can't rush it, or it falls apart." You laugh softly. Joke number 1 appears like a friendly tap on the shoulder. "That explains a lot about my high school group projects." He chuckles, actually chuckles, and waves you toward the center of the room, where the day's activity has condensed into a soft communal hush. A couple of artisans brew fresh mint tea, and the sweet herbal scent floats toward you like a warm invitation. You accept a small glass and blow gently on the surface. Steam curls upward in delicate spirals. The woman who guided your brushing earlier approaches. "You made the last knot," she says, smiling. "That makes you part of today." "It was an honor," you reply, "and you mean it." She nods thoughtfully and leans one elbow on the work table. "Remember that little chaos not children sometimes add? I think you tied the opposite. A lucky knot." Joke number 2 slips in. Let's hope it doesn't unravel dramatically in the middle of someone's living room. She laughs. No. It will hold. You sip your tea and step back, letting the scene seep slowly into you. The light. The wall. The loom's resting silhouette. The artisans murmuring softly. The almost finished day. You feel, woven into all of it. One of the younger weavers, rolling up a smaller rug, calls out jokingly, "You'll come back tomorrow, yes? We need someone to sweep the wall. Very important job." You grin. "My sweeping skills are legendary." He gasps theatrically. "Perfect. You are hired." The workshop erupts in gentle laughter. Joke number 3 folds itself into your smile. "I accept payment exclusively in mint tea and moral support." The master nods approvingly. "Both we can provide." The last rays of sunlight slide away, and warm lamplight takes their place. The glow softens the edges of everything, the carpets, the tools, the very air itself. Shade settles like a comfortable shawl over the room. You step toward the doorway one more time. Outside, night gathers in deep blues and lingering gold. Inside, the workshop glows like a hearth, steady, welcoming, endlessly warm. You realize you're not just observing this world anymore. For this one calm afternoon, you've been part of the weave. And as the first stars prick through the sky, you breathe it in fully, letting the patterns, the warmth, the story settle into you like wool settling into warp. It feels right. It feels like closure. It feels like rest. The evening air settles softly now, loosening the last threads of the day until they flutter into a calm, unhurried quiet. The workshop behind you glows with a warm, honeyed stillness, and even the faintest movement feels gentle, unpressed, unhurried. You breathe in deeply, letting the coolness fill your chest, letting it smooth the little creases of your mind as though someone is softly brushing wool fibers into place. You take one final look at the hanging carpets, their colors dimmed into muted, velvety hues under the lantern's glow. They no longer need to impress or shine. They simply rest, confident in their shapes, content in their stories. And in this slow fading light, you feel yourself mirroring them, settling, softening, easing into a quiet that asks nothing of you. Outside, the village has grown hushed. Footsteps fade. Voices lower. Somewhere, a door closes with a gentle wooden sigh. Night gathers its deep blue fabric and drapes it carefully over rooftops, paths, and distant hills. Each moment stretches a little longer than the one before, like time itself is exhaling again and again, inviting you to follow its lead. You let your shoulders drop. Your breathing deepens. The rhythm of the loom, long since quiet, still seems to echo faintly in your memory, slow, steady, reassuring, like a heartbeat that has learned the art of patience. You stand there for just a moment more, letting the calm settle into every corner of you, like a soft woven blanket pulled gently up to your chin. You're safe here. You're unhurried. You're wrapped in a story that asks only that you rest. And as the last notes of daylight fade, you feel yourself drifting, slowly, comfortably, peacefully, into the night's quiet embrace.